do you think you are? Maybe some of us, myself included, have heard this question throughout our lives with a quite different emphasis. Who do you think you are? Or, since I grew up in Oklahoma, I might be able to translate to a little Oklahoma vernacular. Are you getting too big for your britches? Which, of course, is just another way of saying, stop what you're doing or being right now because it doesn't fit my expectation of you. How you answer the question, who you think you are, matters. It impacts the choices that we make on a day-to-day basis, how we rank our values, how we choose to spend our time and our money. I want you to try something for me. So if you have a pen, you might pull it out. I'm going to give you a moment, and I'd like you to finish this sentence as many times as you can in the short amount of time that I'm going to give you. Right off the top of your head, no editing. And the sentence is simply, over and over again, I am, fill in the blank. One right after the other. If you made it to 20, you have completed something called the 20 Statements Test, or the TST. If you want to Google it later, Google the spelling of the word 20 and then TST, and it will come up right away. This is actually a well-known, long-standing psychological and social psychological assessment that helps to uncover how it is that we craft our understanding of identity. Some of my answers were mother, wife, minister, writer, musician, curious, religious, astute, maybe, influential, creative. You may have some of the same. The creators of the assessment actually sort the responses into 4 different categories: A, B, C, and D. The A mode responses are the type of physical characteristics that you might have listed. I am brown, I am a brunette, I am tall, I am an Oklahoma resident, for example. B mode responses describe socially defined statuses, usually associated with some kind of group membership. I am a college graduate, I am a theist, I am an American, I am a cancer survivor. C mode responses describe styles of behavior or emotional states. I am a happy person, or I'm depressed. I am a classical music fan. I am a fashionable dresser. I am energetic, for example. And then D mode responses are more general than individual. I am a part of the universe. I am a human being. Now, this test was used by Louis Sartre to study the changing self-images of Americans over the decades. Sartre found that in the 1960s, individuals were more likely to give B mode responses. Status is usually associated with a group. But in the 70s and the 80s, people were more likely to give C mode responses, behavior or emotional states. How'd you fare? What about you, and what about now? Even if you have more B mode responses today, this morning anyway, socially defined statuses associated with group membership, the predominant mode for most people today is usually C, defining themselves according to their individual actions and their individual emotions rather than your connections to others. Now, it's likely that there are few, if any, people whose responses fall predominantly in the A or the D mode. The A mode responses being feeling likely that they only have a skin-deep self-concept based more on their appearance to others than on their actual internal qualities. Those more with a D mode response are harder to categorize, and they may actually feel more uncertain about the source of their sense of self. But with this kind of uncertainty in the world about who we are, about how we self-define, religion has been a place where we have come to bind our story to a larger one. In the Hebrew Scriptures, God creates humankind in God's own image. I've always been curious, though, about the tipping point that we claim, when we can claim an image as our own. As in, how many times do you have to run to be a runner? Or bake to be a baker? Do you have to earn money doing it? Can it be a hobby? It's interesting that we often scale ourselves against professionals. But when someone else asks us and they run more than we do, we might say, yeah, you're a runner, right? It's interesting. There are powerful times to claim identity. For example, the I am a cancer survivor, or I am gay as people come out. But at other times, we can feel very boxed in by these same identities. The word image, as in made in our own image, refers to a representation or a perception, and the Latin imago also means the final stage of metamorphosis. So in a sense, our identities are always unfolding, always in transformation. They are made up of our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, mixed in with an understanding of how we believe other people experience us. I am actually shows more of a location in a place in space and time, a story that fits our current circumstances. We craft an image of ourselves like a story, with ourselves as the main character as we encounter each other and the world. We may not be able to choose all the facts that make up that story, but we determine what facts we emphasize and de-emphasize, which parts of our story become main events, and which parts fade into the background. What is the real story of our lives? According to sociologist W.I. Thomas, if a person perceives a situation as real, it is as real in its consequences. This is also known as the Thomas theorem. In other words, our behavior depends not on the objective reality of a situation, but on the subjective interpretation of that reality. The consequences make it real. And because people perceive reality differently, and when they decide how they're going to view a person or a situation, they act accordingly. So if we in turn do not take back that pen of authorship, we will act in response to how we are perceived. So when you label a teenager a deviant, surprisingly, that teenager might start to behave deviantly. Since we all perceive reality differently, our reactions differ. Our definition of a situation as good or bad, to be embraced or avoided, dictates our response to it. And so we have to seek to understand how other people are perceiving reality. What is their story about what happened? Now, I don't know where you're going to be tonight at 8 o'clock, but my phone's going to be off, and I'm going to be watching the series finale of Breaking Bad. Anybody else going to be doing that too? So for those of you who haven't been watching, you probably got caught up on NPR on the drive-in. It's about a chemistry teacher who's diagnosed with terminal cancer and becomes a meth kingpin in an attempt to leave a financial legacy for his family. And over the course of time, he makes one compromise after another to his values and his identity, doing deeds that in the first season he would have thought completely inconceivable. And now he's almost unrecognizable to himself. And tonight we're going to find out how it's all going to end. This power to write our own story about our own lives can feel to some like having the keys to our own kingdom. And to others, the power to write our own story can feel like carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. We can sometimes just want to disappear into the system, not be noticed, be faceless, because we're tired. But we get to decide that too, whether or not we're going to approach that freedom and that responsibility as a freedom or a burden. We can embrace the freedom and responsibility or simply go along with the culture's definition of the meaning of life, of what is good, of what is right, of what is valuable, and how we should spend our days. This is, in fact, the existential crisis of the human experience, to claim our own power in shaping our lives, or to be a cog in a wheel of systems of which we are a part. Very much like our Breaking Bad's Walter White. Now, if you aren't watching Breaking Bad, maybe you've seen this other TV show on TLC called Who Do You Think You Are? It's based on a British show of the same name, and the premise is basically that celebrities traipse across the country researching their genealogy, and cameras follow them as they uncover the larger story of their family, usually with Hollywood-emphasized surprise that highlights some characteristic that the celebrity already has or some hidden interest is explained. The premise holds much more potential than the delivery, let me tell you. But it does bring up a very interesting point. We are products of our DNA. We are products of our family, of our biology. And at a molecular level, we are the products of the universe, even crafted from the dust of stars. If we look at systems theory from its largest lens zoomed outward, we are not only the universe reflecting back upon itself, but we're also products and representations of every single system of which we are a part. So I hold in my identity the pieces of the larger systems of my gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, education, profession, political persuasion, religion. A system is always embedded inside other systems, and all of them are interrelated. Quantum physics tells us that these interrelated and interconnected systems affect one another in the most amazing ways, even when the parts of the various systems appear to be very distant from one another. So, for example, women across the world form a system, and women in China form a subsystem of that system. Due to the nature of systems themselves, we can know that whatever impacts Chinese women will in some way impact women all across the world. So the consequences of our actions are even more significant than we can possibly imagine. And at the same time, our day-to-day experience can feel negligent, even irrelevant, which is why it's so incredible to attach our story to a larger religious context. Connect our story to a community of people who have a common story together. It's interesting, another way to consider this is the macrocosm-microcosm principle. This principle holds that in a living system, the characteristics and force fields that exist in the whole are actually recapitulated in each part. For example, the DNA that makes up the human body is contained in every cell of the body. And so scientists only need a scrap of skin or a drop of body fluid to determine the genetic makeup of the entire body. The Chinese practice of Qigong and reflexology actually has this as well. The hands and feet are parts of the body, but also reflect the whole within them. And so treating the hands and feet can have benefits to the whole. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm and vice versa. And so I am a manifestation of all the systems of which I am a part. And so are you. The danger is when we assume that all we are is a subset of a system and not the complex author of our lives. I am never just a woman, or just a minister, or just a mother, or just a wife, and you are never just what is listed on your list either. And neither is the person in front of us. merely a representation of a single category that we might be made aware of. We have to be in relationship to understand how that system is manifesting in the person who stands before us. And so what are we to do? I would argue that the most radical, most empowered thing that we can do is to pay attention to who we think we are and who we think others are, and make a lot more room for compassion and complexity, letting yourself and others out of the box. When we take on the challenge of owning the responsibility of becoming the author of our lives, we become whole ourselves, authors of our own lives that we are co-creating with the universe. But in order to do that well, we need some champions. We need champions in this life. People who can hold the ambiguity of our multiple identities, the power of our light when it shines as bright as it was intended to do. And when we are surrounded by people who either cannot see us as more than one thing or cannot acknowledge the complexity of who we are, we begin to shrink our understanding of ourselves. When we don't have a mirror for our complexity, Julia Cameron writes, parts of us knows that we are more than they see, and parts of us fear that we are less than we hope. Have you been there? Being experienced by someone else as just one small thing or one identity. All of us need and require believing mirrors, like so many fairy tales suggest, reflecting possibility and not improbability. These mirrors are held up by people who are large enough and expansive enough to not be threatened by another's ambiguity. It just so happens that I've done 2 weddings in the past week. I guess I should have written down, I am an officiant. But this reading that I want to share with you was in both of them and reflects the sentiment of the kind of reflecting I think that we need, the kind of champion, the kind of mirror. It's called Love by Roy Croft. He writes, I love you, not only for what you are, but for who I am when I am with you. I love you not only for what you've made of yourself, but for what you are making of me. I love you for the part of me that you bring out. I love you for putting your hand into my heaped up heart and passing over all the foolish, weak things that you can't help dimly seeing there, and for drawing out into the light all the beautiful belongings that no one else had looked quite far enough to find. I love you because you are helping me to make of the lumber of my life not a tavern, but a temple. Out of the works of my everyday, not a reproach, but a song. I love you because you have done more than any creed could have done to make me good, and more than any fate could have done to make me happy. You've done it without a touch, without a word, without a sign. You've done it by being yourself. Do you have someone in your life who can see you for more than just how they've seen you before? Someone who can embrace your possibility, who can hold your complexity. If we are to lead awakened lives and bear the responsibility of crafting a story that is awake and fulfilling, we need people like this in our lives. People who can draw out into the light all the beautiful belongings that no one else had looked quite far enough to find. Someone who can help you to make of the lumber of your life not a tavern, but a temple. Out of the works of your everyday, not a reproach, but a song. And the best way to find one is to be one. Amen.